Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Leadership Series organized by Cyber Houston. Excited to have you join us today. Today, we'll be discussing compliance and security in the supply chain. Our expert speakers will share lessons learned and advice from their leadership perspective. In our session today, Maria and Pierre Luigi will aim to break down what compliance is, what it means for a company, and to define the necessary steps to tackling this new challenge. Before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. Please post your questions and comments in the chat section, and we will do our best to get to you and answer them while we're live. I'm Phil Beckett, CEO of HASA and Cyber Houston Interim Chair, and I'll be your moderator today. Cyber Houston is a Department of Homeland Security recognized information sharing and analysis organization, or ISAO. We're a coalition of volunteers representing leaders from business, cybersecurity, academia, government, and civic leaders. Our goal is to continuously educate and inform business leaders on how to manage and govern cybersecurity risks. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Maria Scarmardo, founder and CEO of Praxis Data Security. Praxis, hi Maria. Praxis specializes in governance, risk, compliance, and privacy for small to medium-sized companies. Praxis offers practical solutions and risk-based guidance, allowing organizations to mitigate losses and position themselves for success. With ever-changing cybersecurity legislation and compliance protocols, Maria leads efforts in transforming the way people think about the current reactive nature of the industry and strives to be a proactive leader in cyber crime defense. Beyond Praxis, Maria is a board member of I2C Dallas Fort Worth chapter, a member of InfraGard Dallas, a proud member of the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce, and also VP of IMCP Dallas chapter. Maria sits on the Technology Leadership Council, is an experienced technology entrepreneur. She works on promoting education to businesses, what GRC and privacy mean to them, and acts as a leader within the InfoSec community, providing pathways for individuals to learn and succeed by supporting their participation in nonprofit initiatives in the information security industry. Welcome, Maria, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our next expert speaker is Pierre Luigi Stella, Chief Technology Officer, Network Box. Good morning, Pierre Luigi. After 15 years at IBM, Pierre Luigi co-founded Network Box USA, the American division of Network Box Corporation Limited, in 2003. As CTO, his extensive knowledge of security issues and emphasis on the healthcare, banking, and education sectors. He has been featured in SC Magazine, USA Today, LATimes.com, Dark Reading, NewYorkTimes.com, CIO Online, CSO Online, Tech News World, PC Mag, Communication News, PC Today, and CU Times. A frequent featured expert contributor on CUinsight.com and CBinsight.com. He has been profiled in the Houston Business Journal as well as Houston Public Radio. Pierre Luigi has also presented, among others, at HOU.sec.con 18, HIMSS National 2018, Houston Cyber Summit, and the ISACA IAOP 2011 Risk Management and Data Security World Conference in Denver. Pierre Luigi holds a master's degree, magna cum laude, in electrical engineering from the University of Naples, Polytechnical School of Engineering in Naples, Italy. He's received numerous industry recognitions for notable career achievements, in addition to being the recipient of Excellence Awards for Innovation Design. Pierre Luigi, I know, and thank you for all the work you do with Cyber Houston. I've known you for a long time. It's great to have you here as well. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, a big welcome again to both of you, and we've got a lot of material to cover, so I will hand it over to both of you to start. Thanks.
We do. Let me. I'll start very, very briefly. I don't want to take the stage too much. Am I sharing the screen? Is the audience able to see the screen?
You are. You're good, Pierre. Yeah.
Okay.
But you're not on the first slide.
That's what I was just noticing. That I'm supposed to be here. I don't know why I ended up on the fourth slide. Okay. Better?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. So.
Okay. So we'll start with what
does
the supply chain mean and who's in the supply chain?
And allow me 3 seconds of introduction on one thing. We know that the audience of this conversation is primarily business people, right? And Maria and I are both very technical, so we have a tendency to get lost into extremely particular details and the specialized language. You have a comment area and the chat area over there. Don't be shy about bashing us if we're going towards off on a tangent. Please. And also, let's make this a conversation, not a one-way input from our side. Ask questions. It's ask and let's be interactive, because it's the best way to add value and to make sure that all of you walk away from here with some information that's going to be useful.
Yeah, and not just ask questions, challenge. I always say challenge us, or any of the above is good.
Okay.
So, like I said, we're talking about the supply chain, and before we even get into it, it's who is in the supply chain. A lot of companies don't think they're in a supply chain, and when you say supply chain, everybody always thinks government. But in the private sector, there's a supply chain. There's vendors, there's clients, and everybody's in the supply chain. Especially if you're a B2B company, if you're a business to business, you're definitely in some kind of supply chain.
And we probably, I was thinking about it as we were preparing this presentation. We are calling it the supply chain because that is indeed the correct term, but maybe it is also misunderstood, because when you're talking supply chain, you're talking your wardrobe coming from China on a boat to Los Angeles, sitting there in a dock for 3 months, and then getting on a truck, getting all the way to Houston. That's supply chain, right? You can, the Ford not being able to deliver cars because they don't have the chips. That's supply chain. In reality, what we really mean here is we all have clients and we all have vendors. Therefore, we're all in a chain of some sort, right? If my ISP gets hacked and they get into my router and my office is at risk, that's a supply chain problem, right? So we are trying to widen the scope of the conversation, not just to the supplier that gives you the bolts and nuts, or if you're the one building the bolts and nuts, then you're the supplier to the car manufacturer, but more in general, anybody that you do business with. If you're sending them an email, if you're receiving from them an email, if you have any sort of electronic interaction, that's what we're talking about here.
I like to use the example when we talk supply chain, and I always like to bring it down to like a very base level. If you are a landscape company to a company and you are receiving their floor plans or whatever it is, to whatever information you need, you're emailing, you have contract information, you're in a landscape company is in the supply chain. They are a vendor to someone.
So in reality, we are expanding the concept by saying, if you're doing business with me, you're a supplier. Doesn't matter if you actually physically supply me with something, right? You are providing me a service. You're providing me with something that's not necessarily physical and tangible. You're communicating with me. You somehow have access to my electronics, meaning you can send me an email, or you have access to my files, or I have access to your files. And that's what really counts here in this conversation, the mutual access to electronic exchange of information that can be the media for a hack, right? Because if the landscaper guy's email is hacked, I may receive an email from him. I may trust it. I may click on the link because I'm in a hurry and I'm not thinking twice, and that may become a problem for me. So now the landscaper causes me a problem. Supply chain.
Maria and Pierre, I always remember, when it was early when I started with Cyber Houston, the target hack, and in that case, it was the supply chain. It was the HVAC contractor who had loose security that got a hole into Target and let loose everybody's credit card information.
Absolutely, it's a perfect example.
Once they get in, it's a lateral movement. That the lateral movement within was a little bit easier once they got in. But you're right, that was an HVAC incident.
Another example in our own industry for what I do, right? MSPs have quite recently been a target for hackers, not because the hackers want what the MSP has, but because often MSPs have unfettered access to their clients.
Well, they have an access into their all of their clients' environments. So I'm actually have talked to a lot of MSPs about their remote management tools, their RMMs, and the security and the safeguards around them. And they say, well, not every RMM is created equal. And I said, and I don't care. I care about your organization and how your organization is safeguarding how your RMM tool.
Exactly. So hopefully that clarifies what we are addressing here. I don't want the audience to think supply chain. Oh, I don't buy bolts and nuts from China, so this conversation doesn't apply to me. It applies to everybody, just literally everybody. And in fact, Maria was telling me that she's been given a conversation she said a week ago on CMMC. We will discuss this later in some other slides, but if you don't know what it is, but that particular compliance is built exactly on this concept. If you're whatever kind of business you are, if you're doing business with me, you're my supply chain.
Yes.
Period. Okay? No escaping. You are part of the supply chain. Okay.
And Maria, Pierluigi, maybe I'm not jumping to the end, but what I see is some of the larger vendors are starting to force you through requirements if you want to do business or have right.
It's already there. It's already there.
This conversation today, yes.
Yeah, we are definitely going to be talking about any of the larger organizations. They're doing vendor management. That's become very large in the space, in the enterprise space, is vendor management and being forced. The smaller guys, everything rolling downhill, they're being forced to show their best practices and what they have as far as their security safeguards, protocols, all of those things.
And I guess the concept of vendor management, I'm going to skip to the next slide because we're already going into the conversation here, has changed. As a vendor myself, and we are all vendors, we just said, we have established that we are all vendors to somebody else, right? So as a vendor myself, I've had to do my own vendor management due diligence over the years from my clients. I've noticed over the years that what they ask has changed. 20 years ago, all they wanted to see were my financials. Because vendor management 20 years ago was, are you going to be here next year? Practically. Right?
Well, they were asking for your organizational infrastructure to see if it was stable. Yeah. Now it's not only are you stable, and that goes into a lot of the compliance, like what SOC does, is are you a stable company, that internally stable, but also do you have security safeguards in place for again, SOC with their trust criteria and what they're asking for, the security, integrity, confidentiality. They just, and I'm missing one. I missed the one, but availability. Thank you. That then you have to bring those in and also prove that you have those safeguards in place. So with a certifiable compliance.
Some sort of something, and that's why we are in this slide now. Let's talk about some certifiable compliance. And one of my pet peeves along my 20 years of career has always been, I always tell everybody, compliance doesn't make you secure.
It really does. It's people use it as a check mark, and a lot. So back to Phil, to your comment about people asking for these assurances. That's what they're asking. The problem in that as well right now in the industry is that they're asking for a certifiable compliance because the procurement officers or whoever's asking for it doesn't actually know what they are asking for. So they're like, do you have a SOC audit? And again, SOC audits are are great. They're great, but compliance does not mean security. I always say there's a Venn diagram where you say there's compliance that checks marks and then security that goes beyond that. Compliance is, people see it as, I have this done, and it can be like, yeah, I got that met. But that doesn't mean you're internally and infrastructurally secure.
It's an unfortunate truth that for many years, too many companies have tried to mark, to fill in a check mark, right? Yes, I have. Do you have an antivirus? Yes. Nobody can ethically ask, is it a good one? Or, you know, or did you write it? Did you write it in your off time, right? You have one, right? Now we're getting to the point where finally somebody is finding that it is okay to ask the question. Okay, you have a firewall. Okay, let me see it. Let me look inside, right? Not because not all firewalls are created equal, because they probably are. Who knows? It doesn't matter. But not all firewalls are installed equally, right? We have. The other day, if you go to a doctor, you know and you expect that he's passed an exam to be allowed to be a doctor. If you go to a lawyer, he's passed the bar exam. If you call somebody in our sector, anybody can do it, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, you may ask for a certification, but it doesn't really a professional certification. It doesn't really necessarily mean anything.
And to your point, Pierre, Luigi, there's a lot of times where I'm going to jump over to the compliance side of even in CMMC. We have people that say we have GCC high, and I'm like, that's great. And GCC high is installed but not configured correctly.
Exactly.
So if you don't have the right people configuring it, then it means nothing.
And that's why in this slide we're trying to make the strong point, which unfortunately it just surprises me that in 2022 we still need to make this point. If you're spending the money, spend them right? Don't just stop at the check mark of I got a SOC certification. Okay, and what do you do with that? What does it really mean? I think I clicked on my mouse a little too many times. Is there a way to go back on this thing? I'm sorry.
Well, while you're doing that, I think you both made the point is, getting the check mark is one thing, but now you're having to produce evidence and documentation that's in lines with your policies and procedures, and that proves that you are doing what your checkbox says.
And that's a really huge point, because I work in a world of policies and procedures and making sure that the right processes are in place. And I talk to people about that compliance versus security within your organization and making sure it's stable. I'll give you an example. I was working with a company that was a very small company, and we were doing their data flow, and 3 of their employees got from point A to point B. That's what they did their job. But when we interviewed them, all 3 of them did it differently. Their process wasn't. So for their MSP, there was like, whenever they were coming to troubleshoot when there was something wrong, it was always hard to troubleshoot. It didn't streamline it. So I talk to people about organizational risk and organizational security. I go, your processes are everything. And improving that as well is important. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about cyber insurance, but and other compliances. Your policies and procedures are definitely part of your security, and having the right processes and have it be throughout your organization, whether you're an organization of 5 or 5,000, is important.
And sorry, I have the 6 screens in front of me and something was going on. I apologize for the distraction. I have seen this also a change in the approach, I would say, that auditors are taking to compliance. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, auditors were happy to come in and see. Even they were doing check marks. I've had numerous conversations with auditors about the futility of audits and compliance when when done that way, right? This has changed a lot to the point that Maria's, being an auditor, has become one of my best friends, right? And we do these things together. I can tell you, 15 years ago, this would not have happened because I had a view that was so in such an antithesis with auditors. My view was about security, and you have to get it done. You have to do the work to get it done. Finally, I have to say, audits are much closer to that today. Auditors get in and they look at your firewall. They open it up. They want to see your rules. They audit your every single line. I've had some auditors come into some of my clients and check and want and demand an explanation of every single line that was in the firewall configuration, and wanted to see the ticketing system where the control management, change control was being done to authorize and request those specific changes. Very important, because that's another concept that we often overlook that puts you closer to compliance. You can't just put in something that you call security and just pretend that you're managing it. A proper management of security needs to be done through proper procedures that Maria has just highlighted, and those imply change management. You can't just willy-nilly all of a sudden make a change and then forget it, and then that's how they get you, because you forgot an open port or something, right? And it's 2022. We shouldn't even be discussing these things anymore.
No, security but we still are.
Unfortunately, we still are. We've been doing this. I mean, security has been around for a long time, obviously, in terms of cybersecurity, but has exploded after 2005, pretty much 2003, where internet has become a big deal for everybody, right? With the explosion of the internet, we had the explosion of the security threats that have exponentially grown. It's been 20 years, right?
I don't want to pick on MSPs, but MSPs are a lot of they're technologists for a lot of companies. They have their hands in a lot of companies. And when I was sitting here reading these comments that says you can't put something in and call it security. Again, I talk to a lot of MSPs. I partner with a lot of MSPs. They are very near and dear to my heart because I service the mid-market and the SMB space. But they also have these security stacks that they put them in. This is my security stack, and I put it in. And whenever I go and we're going to talk about compliance, whenever I go in for a compliance consultation of, are you meeting these security requirements? I give an eye to whatever it is that compliance is. Their security stack again is not configured great, or sometimes it is. Again, you can't just put it in and call it security. It meets some marks.
And it requires a level of competence and unfortunately, I'm sorry if I have to use this word, but it is the only word I can think of right now. A level of competence that in our industry is not certifiable. I don't want to say by all means it exists. There's some incredibly strong and competent people, but it's not a certifiable skill. A doctor is a doctor. Yes, there are good doctors and bad doctors. There are good lawyers and bad lawyers, but all of them have gone through the same grinding machine that will, to the same school and the same certifications and the same bar tests and whatever.
But I'm going to challenge you on this one. I'm going to challenge you just a little bit, only because, yes, again, there's a lot of misregulation. There's no regulation in the technology space for mid-market SMBs. Agreed. But there are certifications. There's great certifying bodies like ISACA and ISC squared and things like that that provide. But it's trickling down. That talent's trickling down. We do have a lack of resources and a lack of talent. Most of those people are going into the enterprise space and not servicing the SMB and mid-market. But there's companies like myself and there's other companies that I partner with that are trying to bring that talent and that certifiable knowledge into the space. And it takes educating business owners to be asking for those certifications.
Yeah, and the problem is that those are very expensive and business owners don't want to pay them. Whether they hire them directly or through an MSSP, they still don't want to pay them. That's the
Again, I think it takes the education. So I think
I want to ask you both just on that. You're right. I mean, because small, mid-sized companies just can't afford all of this. And if you've got, a bunch of domains, maybe 20 domains that you need to cover from security, you've got, 100 items in the policies and maybe 200 in your procedures. Well, do you have practical advice on how a small, medium company keeps up with all of that, the change control and with compliance?
So again, the small SMBs and mid-market lean on their technologists, whoever their technologist is for their company. And any company today in 2022 that says they're not a technology company is a lie, because you have a phone, you do everything on apps, you bill, it's a technology company. And how do you keep up with that? Again, I feel that my company Praxis, that's who we're marketing to, and that's who we're here to help. And in the last 2 years, I've met 4 other companies that are in my space doing what I do. And so that is coming. It's just taking a little bit of time. And back to the other point of educating a business owner to look for these, to ask the right questions, and know that there are companies like mine and that are coming up to help.
And so basically the idea is, if you are a small, medium business company, the only choice, in my opinion, and apparently also in Maria's opinion, is you need to outsource this. You are not going to be able to keep up. You're not going to be able to retain people. You don't even try. You're not going to be able to retain security experts in a medium-sized company, because they're going to get bored, or you're not going to be able to pay them enough. They're going to leave. The market is too big. There is too much of a need for them elsewhere. They're going to go away. You're going to waste your time trying to build a team, and 2 years later, you're going to lose it. The best solution for anyone who can't afford millions of dollars in budgets is to outsource completely the whole problem to somebody that does this for a living. Because quite frankly, this is an example I made 5 years ago somewhere else, and I still like it. And unfortunately, it's very present today. You end up being like, you show up in a duel, they have a tank and you have a knife. That's the idea, right? So don't even try. Leave somebody else to do this for you. And by the way, it's going to cost you less, because a company that does this for a living can spread the load and the cost over multiple clients. They're not going to charge you $150,000 a year, depending on what they're doing, of course, but that's probably not going to happen. Whereas a CISSP with decent experience is going to expect at least that much money. He's going to expect a 6-figure salary, and 2 years later, it's going to be gone, and you're going to be left without even the passwords to your firewalls. That happens. Okay, that happens. They leave, and you don't even know your network structure or anything. And this joins well to this slide about the issues that you can run into. I mean, reputation is an obvious one, but what is not very obvious to many is, first of all, there are a lot of regulations today that will impose fines if you get hacked.
Especially if you have personal, like PII, personal information.
Yeah.
Most states now, you have to report. I was talking about this yesterday. You have to report to the Attorney General. If you don't report at the amount of time that the law states, you get fined. Depending on how many records were taken, you get fined. If you did not have the right safeguards in place, and your best practices due diligence, you get fined.
And by the way, the time frame to report, there is a proposal going around that now it's going to be cut down to 4 days.
4 days. You have 4 days to report.
4 days to report. Right now, I think it's 30 or 60.
And that's just talking about privacy. That's just talking about PII. That's not even, we were talking about intellectual property. There's a lot of companies that don't have, they're like, I'm fine. I have no personal information. We don't even keep credit card numbers. We're good. We don't take birth dates, socials, nothing. But then we talk about the intellectual property. So I had, again, I like to use examples. I have a client that when we got into what is the heartbeat of your business? and it was their IP,
Mhm.
and all over their IP was done within Microsoft. It's talking about hacks. Sony had a huge hack, and what does Sony have? It's all IP. It's all intellectual property. It's all their movies and the music, and that
But
got hacked, and they lost
even if you
millions.
don't retain anything, right? Even if you don't, if you truly you don't retain anything, at the minimum, somewhere you have a list of your clients with your invoices. What if you lose that? You can't invoice your clients, so you're gonna go out of business. Like it's a nonsense to say that you don't have anything to protect. You're a business. You got something to protect. Just you can't even begin to have the conversation.
I like to talk about exactly that when I say, what if you are a manufacturing company and you can't do business for 2 days? How much does that cost you?
Exactly.
What it's going to cost you? Like if you lose your invoicing records and those records, let's talk about how do we pay taxes? How do we report? Like
Yeah.
those things
Uh,
is a pain.
And there is a number two here on this slide that we tend to underestimate. But honestly, when to go back to Phil's example, when Target was hacked, I didn't go to Target for a year. Now Target is a huge company; they can afford that, right? They lost 40% of their business, I think, and they're still there, and they recovered.
It's
But
okay. I've already paid Target. Everybody's tuition at Target.
But we are talking about small and medium companies. The people that listen to these conversations here are small and medium companies. If you lose 40% of your business because of reputation loss, are you going to be able to survive? Are you going to be there tomorrow? That is the core of this conversation. Is today we're talking about pure survival. A successful attack can literally take you out of business. Even if you don't have any PII, even if the district attorney isn't coming after you, you still lost your business. Okay? So that is why we are so insistent on compliance and security. It's not because we're trying to sell you stuff that you don't need. It's because this is real and it's serious. And when hackers put their mind to it, I don't know if you're reading the news, there are 500,000 people around the world that subscribed to attack the Russians, and they've taken now down 90% of their sites. When people get their mind to it and they attack, you better have serious protections.
Right? I actually also had this conversation yesterday about so I always tell people SMBs, mid-market, but I'm not a Target. I'm not a Target. I'm not a Sony. So I'm not in that position. I don't have anything. And I tell them it's gotten to the point of think about sales and sales cycle.
Yeah.
If I want to get a $1 million deal, the sales cycle is very long, especially like if we go into enterprise space, sales cycles are long. If you go to the smaller areas, the sales cycle is a lot smaller. Business owners make decisions a lot quicker. It's the same thing. I could go and now, of course, you know that ransomware is something you can buy off the shelf like Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
And I could go and tap into 7 small businesses and make, even if I charge $1,500 for, like, they all give me $1,500, I do it in a few hours and then I move on instead of $1 million. So it's
actually, let me make a point on that. That is very important. There is this I would say this myth, urban myth, that Bitcoin is not trackable, right? Which is no longer true. The only cryptocurrency that is really not trackable today is Monero. Bitcoin, you buy it, you deal with it through marketplaces like Coinbase or Uphold or others. It is trackable, period. So hackers have only one way to keep the FBI away from them: to stay below the threshold. Instead of going after somebody with a $50 million hack, right, asking for a $50 million ransom, they ask you for $2,000. When you go to the FBI and say, I got hacked, they want $2,000, they're going to tell you, sorry, it's too small, we're not going to do anything about it. unless you can demonstrate that it's the same hacker that hacked the 50 people, and so the amount total is big enough for them to intervene, they are not going to, because they got bigger fish to fry. So in reality, we got to the point today where the smaller companies are more of a target because there is a sort of a impunity because you're too small to matter in a way, right?
Yeah,
And it's an unfortunate situation because obviously you want your money back, you want justice, but that's the reality of it that you're dealing with.
it is, and I want to address Paul's comment of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and the propaganda. I agree. In this conversation, we're not trying to put some fear or uncertainty and doubt. We're just going with what we have for our metrics. And and it's not about fear. It's just some realities, and we don't use it to sell any marketing or public relations. And I agree, there's a lot of companies that do, which I do want to address. There's a lot of companies that sell fear and doubt, and then they sell an all-inclusive product for security, and that doesn't actually exist. So I did, again, just wanted to address Paul's comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry if the comment. It is true that some people think the way still. It's unfortunate because fear is real, and it is a fact. These are statistics. Okay? I'm not here trying to sell anything to anybody. We are citing statistics. We are looking at what is actually happening, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the FBI releases every year statistics on the number of businesses that go out of business because of cyber attacks. So fear. If we're doing fear, yes, you should be scared. Maybe, but yes, you should be scared because you should be worried. You should be taking these things seriously because everybody's a target. And when we say everybody's a target, it is true. And the internet is an open space for everybody. Your neighbor is in China. He's one click away from you anyway.
And I was looking at statistics of ever since the political atmosphere went and the uptick since the Ukraine-Russia incident is happening is there is an uptick in some of the cybercrime. But we'll move on to the good news.
The good news. But before we left that, I did want to. Great. I mean, there's definitely that these threats are real, and one has to be practical about what you can do. And this series here is to talk about, options and ideas and ways that people can take and manage their cyber risk and threat, but they've got to understand what that risk is, what the threats are, and then make business decisions on that.
I always say risk-based decisions. So when we come into a company and we do their risk assessment or whatever, it is to give the executives, whoever they are, whether it's, again, company of 5 and whoever that business owner is, they are making risk-based business decisions, just like they would for their financials, just like they get an accountant and a bookkeeper to do their financials. They get an IT person to do their IT. They need to get a security person to do their security. So that's just how it is. It's not. They need to know what their threat, and they need to know what their risks are, and they need to measure it, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm always asking this: if you need, say, physical security, you're not gonna try and you put a gun in your pocket and start walking around the perimeter of your company. You're gonna hire somebody, right? So, Maria rightfully says, if you need an accountant in small media companies, you're probably gonna hire an accountant from outside. Why is the security isn't important enough to actually hire experts in the sector? Because it is misunderstood, because it's underestimated. The importance of the issue is way underrated, underestimated. The gentleman that was making the comment earlier made another comment. He said we call this company ending event. He is right. Okay? These could become company-ending events, but on the other hand, now we are on a different slide.
Yeah, and so back to the good news of it, and when we say the compliance security, Pierre, Luigi, and I were talking about this because when he got his audit, he's able to say, I'm also certified here, 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 and wins more contracts. Whenever he markets himself, he can use it as the same thing. And it could be, I always talk about ROI. So yes, it costs a lot of money to get a cert, a security certification for your, but if depending on what industry you're going into, if that contract is going to be worth it, you should do it.
In fact, a couple of years ago, I prepared another similar presentation specifically on this topic. We are used to thinking of IT and security in particular as a cost center, right? And therefore, when we talk about what's it going to cost, the most that we can say is what is the total cost of ownership and how I reduce the total cost of ownership. In reality, the conversation on this topic has changed because now without security, you can't do business. In many cases, I have seen bids, requests where aside from saying all that you can do, whatever it is that you do, if you build bolts and nuts, that's what you're doing. At the bottom of the bid, you need to add something about something that shows that you're taking security seriously. Some compliance, some certification, some questionnaire filled in, whatever it is, right? And that means that the security is changing from a cost to a revenue generator. Because if you do not have that part in the contract, you can't even participate in the bid. Well, yeah, of course, it's a cost. Everything in a company, every time you spend money, it's a cost. It's not that now it's no longer a cost, right? But it is a cost that actually becomes a revenue a revenue generating tool. Because without it, literally, you cannot do business anymore. We are at the point where if you don't do these things properly, nobody wants to talk to you. You cannot be in business. Okay? And when you gave my example, but okay, that would be obvious because that's what I do for a living. But it is everybody wants to see what you're doing for your security before they even allow doing business with you. Now, at the beginning of this conversation, we had a slide that said things like CMMC, HIPAA, NIST, and so forth, right? But why do we mention those? Because if I am a business,
compliances,
yeah,
well, not all of them, but yes.
If I am a business that doesn't know anything about security, but I want to be sure that my vendors are doing something to secure themselves, I do not know what to ask. I have no idea where to begin. What do? I look for some kind of framework that can give me a peace of mind that at least they're doing something about it, right? So I refer to things like the NIST, for example.
We can argue about this point all day as far as compliance, certifiable compliance, and doing your security, because like you said, NIST is a free framework. NIST is out there. It's not certifiable. No. You go and you understand the NIST framework and you implement it as part of your internal our internal requirements are going to be NIST based, and there's plenty of frameworks and plenty of things where people don't do that, but it is what it is. And to your point, people that are doing business with you don't know what to ask, so they ask for something certifiable. And I think I mentioned that earlier. Yeah. They just ask for something certifiable. The reality is that you can get somebody to get, you can either do it internally or hire a company to help you do your security documentation. So when cyber insurance comes and asks you for it, when another company asks you for it, you're not under any regulatory compliance, or so you can definitely do a NIST to have those safeguards in place and show documentation for it.
It's a way to structure your approach, right? Yes. Because it is a very well structured framework. If you don't know where to begin, you take that and you follow it, and okay, check. I don't like to say check. That's what you're doing, really, right?
Yeah, it's the same. Same concept.
It's a
But those are your internal security requirements, is what I like to say. Is when a company adopts it, they are giving themselves a compliance. We're going to live under these rules, and these are our best practices.
But I think, as we talked a little bit about this before, you can do that, but then they come back to you and say, hey, I want a screenshot that shows.
And so then you go and you still, even though it's a NIST framework, you can, there's plenty of tools out there where you can take the evidence to support each one of those things, just like you would any certifiable compliance. So that's not different. It's the same concept. You just need to know what you're doing and what you're looking for. So I don't know, Phil, does that answer it?
Yeah, no, it's you sort of, staying on top of that all the time, so
it's called governance. So
yeah.
I CMMC, and it's the governance portion of it that people have a hard time with. It's not a one and done. When we say GRC and they go, what does it stand for? I'm like, governance. And they're like, what does that mean? I said, you stay on top of it. You have somebody dedicated to stay on top of your stay on top of your security requirements. And even if they're internal and you're saying, these are my best practices, these are my internal requirements, that governance piece is what gets everybody. You need to understand also that a lot of these security documentation are living documents. So they have to be tested. They have yearly. That's why they say, are you doing a risk assessment yearly? It's things change. Are you doing your vendor management? Vendor management is huge. Again, back to that supply chain, change management. Are you checking your firewalls monthly? Are you patching? Those things are within that NIST framework, and every framework security framework is the governance piece that people are not doing, and people don't understand how important the governance piece is.
One thing I would ask is that you were talking about business processes. I would add, not ask, sorry. You were talking about business processes. All of this becomes easier if security becomes inherent part of all your business processes. And every time you discuss new business processes, you include the security aspect with it. If it starts with the security, then it's inherently more secure. If you build your business processes and then, oh, by the way, 3 days later, you call Maria to secure them, then it's like putting a shrink wrapping something that's already been built. It's not necessarily so easy, right? Or you may need to modify the business process. So one thing that makes all of this easier is think, while you design your business processes, think of them with security in mind. Right? You're building a website to allow your users to track their time from the field, because, I don't know, you build pipelines and they need to clock in the morning, but they're not in the office. They're out there 6,000 miles away. Okay, don't just put up a website that everybody can see, and if you do it with a WAF. Just an example, right? What does it mean? It means you designed your business process in a way that it has in security in it, right?
You document it.
And yes, documented. So that you don't have to scramble later on because somebody hacked into it and got into your HR systems, right? And because you built the process without thinking of, I'm going to expose a time system, a time clocking system to the whole world. Okay, just an example, but they just, I don't know, came to mind because of what I've done before. But it's a fitting example of the million examples that we could probably give. We are probably starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
We are at one last slide, I believe.
Phil?
Yeah, I know. Well, we definitely wanted to talk about zero trust, I think, and I'd love to hear your around SIEMs as well, and how managing your compliance towards all, audit logs.
So yes, I'll try to cover my portion a little bit more quickly. So zero trust, like you said, is a culture, not a product. I'm going to give an example. Because I talk about zero trust at very different levels, at the organizational level, also adoption and the way of thought as far as the processes go, zero trust processes outside of the technology. And then there's zero trust within the technology. And there's great technology out there for zero trust. And the other part, again, going back all the way back to education, is zero trust in an endpoint is great, but then you have to also zero trust in your network. So and there's different products that take care of all of these things. And I'm going to give this example, which I give to a lot of business owners, where I say zero trust. So have you ever been into an office building where you have to go in and you have to sign your name? You have to give your ID and sign your name, or badge in to say verify your identity so that you can go into the building, and you can only go into the building to a certain room, right? Like you are badged in for that room. That's kind of the concept, right? Zero trust has always existed in a way when there's security in place. So I don't know if that example helps a lot of people, but that's how I always like to explain it at the most basic level. Is that's always been there. They do not trust you to go roam a building. You have to show your identity, state where you're headed, and what your intention is there.
I think that's a perfectly fitting example that goes, in fact, against everything that I've seen in 20 years of us building flat networks. And we continue to build flat networks. It's something that really I can't understand. We have built MPLS flat networks for 20 years. Now we're replacing them with SD-WAN, and we're doing the same mistake. We're building them again without security as flat networks. And it's something that it's completely beyond comprehension, because why do we continue? And by the way, zero trust isn't a new concept. The zero trust concept was introduced in 1994 by a gentleman by the name of Stephen Paul Marsh, that was doing a doctorate thesis on security, on cybersecurity. So we're talking 30 years ago. John Kindervag introduced it for Forrester in, I think it was 2010. We're talking about 12 years ago. So we are talking about concepts that aren't new. We didn't just come up with this yesterday.
But the phrase was coined. Yeah. The phrase was coined.
Yes, the concept of zero trust was invented and started 30 years ago, before security was even a thing, right? And in 2010, Forrester, which, by the way, Forrester in 2004 had already told us, look, you shouldn't trust your LAN. The LAN is not an environment you can trust. The only reason why zero trust has become a big deal today is because of the introduction of mobility and cloud has made the problem a lot more prevalent. Because when you are in my office and I can see what you're doing, the zero trust is applied the way I can see what you're doing, right? Maybe. So there is some kind of an idea of a form of direct control. Now I've lost the control because people are working from home and the cloud and the phones and the tablets. So there is no longer a closed architecture. We're talking about a deperimeterization of the network that has forced us into the concept of zero trust. Now, to Maria's point and to what this slide says, please do not fall into the idea, into the trap that a single company can give you zero trust. Zero trust is not a product. It's I like to say that it's a frame of mind. Right? You need to build your entire security structure around the idea that you, as Kindervag said, assume breach and trust by verify, which, by the way, is a Russian proverb. I found out. Trust by verify. So, as you said, I let you in based on your credentials, but then at every step of the way, I re-authenticate whether you are allowed to go some places or not. Right, and that strengthens my security because I don't just let you in and now it's all open. And therefore, if you breach me once, now you're everywhere, right? And the idea of that is that even if I do breach, if I get breached at the edge of this no longer existent perimeter, I may be able to stop you there because you don't have the credentials to go any further. That's why zero trust is important, because you're trying to keep the idea of assume breach, right? You're assuming that sooner or later, if they want in, they'll get in. But then what you're doing is you're building this castle with the 20 layers, where if they really want to get to the 20th layer, they gotta break 20 firewalls, right? It's not just firewalls, it's just an example, it's just an idea, a concept. They have to go through 20 different steps of security, whether it's trusting the network or trusting the user or trusting the user with the application into the network. That depends on the particular aspect of the situation. But that's the important part, is you can't just open up things and make flat networks anymore.
Okay? Thanks, Pierre. I know we're coming up against time here. And I wanted to bring maybe your thoughts there, Pierre, Luigi, Maria, if you could comment back on that zero trust and the supply chain and compliance, and just maybe close the loop for everyone.
Oh, bring it all back. And in the supply chain, again, so that's actually a really great segue into that. And when we talk about vendor management and in the supply chain, basically that's what's trickling down: zero trust. I do not trust that you have your best practices in place. I do not trust. I need proof verification that you have best practices in place. I need the evidence piece to it. I need a third party to come certify that you're doing what you say you're doing. That's what's being asked for in the supply chain. And regardless of whether it's in the government supply chain, the manufacturing supply chain, or just B2B businesses asking for that information.
And then once I allow you into my network, I still only allow you where you need to go, and very clearly, in very clearly well-defined ways that you cannot step out of, so that we don't get another target situation where an HVAC person had access to the entire network. Right?
And also, people don't inherently do the right thing. I mean, right. I think I actually was at another cyber event where we were talking about a concept of, so when you're speeding, you start you make it okay to go 5 miles higher because you haven't gotten caught yet. 5 miles higher, there's no regulation in there until you get like a speeding ticket for going 20 miles over. But like while you were driving on a long road trip, you just kept going 5 miles, another 5 miles over, another 5 miles over. And that concept of making it okay. So people don't inherently do the right thing, best practices. Everybody cuts corners. I do it. Everybody inherently does it. It's that third-party certification that's being asked for to assure that you are doing what you say you do. Everybody needs that principle that teaches.
The human factor in all of this is the hard part, and that's why we need a broader, more diverse workforce in cyber and all those things. I want to thank you both so much, Maria, Pierre, Luigi. Thank you for doing this. It was super helpful. I think it was really, hope our viewers learned a lot. And I want to thank you both. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Well, thank you for having us. I hope it was useful in some ways.
Definitely.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Thanks to Maria and Pierre Luigi. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners today. Thanks for spending time with us. Hope you enjoyed our session. And we'll come back and join us again. For our viewers, this presentation will be available on the Cyber Houston Facebook page, YouTube channel, and the cyberhouston.org website. Please subscribe to our Cyber Houston YouTube channel and follow our Cyber Houston Facebook page. Remember to hit the notification button to receive updates on new cybersecurity leadership content. At Cyber Houston, we take lessons learned from our enterprise members, distill them into sensible, economical guidance to help small and medium-sized businesses improve their cyber posture and build resilience. We're here for you and committed to the economic vitality of all enterprises with a sharp focus on our small and mid-sized businesses. This guidance comes in the forms of a business vitality guide, guidance for the board of directors, a cyber preparedness assessment available in PDF as well as online, and the free cyber scan. All these resources are available free of charge and can be found on the resource tab on cyberhouston.org website. A special thanks to all our sponsors. Couldn't do this without you. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Bluelands, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston downtown. Thank you all. Until later, remain cyber strong.